Tonight's guest is Jay. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Vic. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time. Jay, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I was born in 1974 to a military family, and I spent the early years traveling around the world with my dad in the Air Force, and ended up on the prairies of Canada. And I was raised on the prairies. I went to high school there, university there, and studied economics. I have a degree in economics, and I've used that around the world, actually. I kept on traveling, and I've used that degree around the world, mostly in banking and finance. And I currently reside in East Africa, close to Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. And so that's basically that's who I am.
Wow, that's an interesting way to grow up. When you were growing up as a kid on the military bases, were there a lot of other kids to play with, or were you kind of isolated?
No, we had a kindergarten and a high school, or a grade school and high school just down the street from us. We probably had, it's not a large military base, but there was probably, 4,000 or 5,000 people that lived on that base. And, most of them had their families with them. So there was quite a hive of activity, I guess you could say. A lot of kids, a lot of families, and there was park spaces. And we didn't do too bad living on the military base, that's for sure.
Well, that's great. Sounds like a good way to grow up. Considering what your dad did you have a lot more freedom than most kids, or were things more structured and strict for you?
Oh, I grew up as a free bird. So, Dad being in the Air Force, he was a firefighter. So we ended up, riding around in fire trucks and going out and seeing the airplanes on the runways. And just outside the military base was all the farmers' fields. So we used to get our 22s and we used to go out there and shoot gophers all day long. And we lived the free lifestyle back then. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great way to grow up. That's how it was when I was growing up. You just go out, and as long as you're home by the time the street lights come on, you're golden. But yeah, your parents didn't know where you were, and I just loved all that freedom. That's the way to do it. It really is.
Yeah, the first mother that would yell out supper. So then you knew it was time to come home. Whoever's house you were closest to, some mom would yell supper, and all the kids would have to run home at that time. So yeah, those are the good times.
That they were. Yeah, they definitely were. Did you have a lot of trouble getting off of the base, though? You talked about heading out to the land surrounding the bases with your 22s. I didn't think it was all that easy for kids to come and go from military bases, was it?
Well, so back in the 80s, when I lived on that base, we had a side entrance was for the civilian side. So the civilians could come into the sort of the back side of the gate where the housewives and the kids would all be while the men were all working on the military base. So we had a back gate, and that gate wasn't closed during the day. And in fact, there was no guard on that gate either. You could just come and go as you please. It was only after about, say 8 o'clock at night when they would actually close the gate, and then it would become a gated community, and then the guards would start patrolling, and the military police would be out, that sort of thing. But during the day, our little part of the military base was almost like a small little village. There were shops, and there was a bakery there. There was a Canex duty-free store. Like I said, the schools were there, the parks. And so it was almost like a little village within a military base.
Huh, not bad. Sounds like you had a really good arrangement. How big was that base, though?
Well, so it was set up as a Cold War base. I believe it come about in the 1960s. And it was used as a radar base. And they got an underground nuclear bunker there, and they had multiple runways. And it was actually their fighter wing was attached there. It was part of some sort of air wing where they trained pilots, and they had freighter planes and cargo planes and all these little T-33 things or whatever, those little trainer jets they had there, and lots of helicopters there. And so that wasn't a huge base, but like I say, 3,000 or 4,000 people probably lived on that base. And for me, being a small child, it was a pretty big place, pretty exciting place, actually.
Yeah, sure sounds like it. Like I said, it sounds like it was a great place to grow up. How many people have you shared your experience with?
I have when the experience happened, I was only close family members that knew about it. I kept it very tight because I was traumatized by it and I didn't think people would believe me. And even when I spoke to a psychiatrist later on, he didn't even believe me. So I just basically kept it under wraps. And it wasn't until I started dating a European girl and I explained to her what happened. I trusted her enough that I told her, and she didn't laugh at the idea, and she didn't put me down about the idea. And I realized that maybe there are people that can take a story like this without subjecting me to ridicule. So then, as as my friend circle expanded through time, I probably told, I don't know, call it 24 people that know about this story. Yeah.
I don't want to jump to conclusions, but when you told her about your experience and she didn't laugh at you, she seemed to be receptive to it. Was that the start of your recovery from that encounter?
Yeah. Again, this goes back into the university years. So this is where I decided that I wasn't going to be afraid of the encounter anymore. I wasn't going to be afraid of this beast, and I would start opening up and sharing the story a little bit more with people. And I wasn't going to live in fear of this beast. And if people weren't going to, even if they were going to laugh at me, even if they were going to have some ridicule, well, then so be it, And I'm just not going to live with this, the trauma of having that in my heart and in my head, and being scared of the bump in the night sort of thing. Yeah.
I'm so glad you took that mindset. So many eyewitnesses live as if they're in a prison with no walls. They can't tell anyone for fear of how it's going to be received. So to hear that you actually did start sharing it, that's great. That's really good. Do you wear your encounter like a badge of honor or see it as a curse?
I probably see it both ways. It made me who I am in the sense that I grew a lot of courage out of it, and I got the courage to travel the world, to step out of the box, and not be afraid of what's out there, I guess, to be afraid of society, to be afraid of the world. That overcoming of fear had to happen first through the wolf. I had to lose fear of the wolf and then step outside into the real world. And so that is a blessing. But for that first 10 years after the encounter, it was a curse. It was trauma. It was deep, deep, dark, morbid nightmare, traumatizing horror, basically. Yeah.
Well, I can understand why, considering what happened, but I'm just glad that you were able to come to terms with it finally over the years as the years went by. Thank goodness for that. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com. All right, Jay, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, this incident happened in either 1983 or 1984, and I was a child living on a military base. The base was called CFB Penhold. It's located next to Red Deer, Alberta. It was a air base with a big, I guess it was a big radar station to keep out the Soviets, and it had a big nuclear underground bunker to protect all the politicians in case we were ever attacked. And they had an air wing there where they train fighter pilots and, lots of cargo planes and helicopters. And my father was attached there as a firefighter on the airside crash rescue. And we lived in a part of the base called the PMQs, the private married quarters. So this is kind of like a civilian area of the base where all of these soldiers could live with their families and their wives. There was a kindergarten, a school, and a little store called Canex. And for the most part, all the civilians were kept on that side of the base. That access to that side of the base was open during the day. You could walk in and out through a gate. You could leave the base anytime you wanted. Our house was only probably about 200 meters from one of the gates to get in and out. But at night, that part of the base would be what would you call now would be like a closed gated community. They'd lock the gates and everything be locked down for the night. And if you wanted to actually enter that area, you'd have to go all the way through the main guard booth at the front of the military base and drive all the way through the base to get to the PMQ area. The reason why I'm talking about this is because if you walk outside that gate, there is nothing out there. There's just farmers' fields. There's no forest. There's no rivers or anything. It's just desolate prairie. So this incident happened pretty much in a village setting, if you can imagine. A PMQs on a military base surrounded by farmers' fields in a very village-like setting. The house that we lived in was a military sort of bungalow, 2 stories, very small. The upstairs had 2 bedrooms. The downstairs had 1 small little kitchen, like I said, single bathroom. And these were just like little row house bungalows that all the soldiers lived on. They're probably built back in the 1950s, 1960s, little tiny cardboard houses, basically. I'm emotional discussing this because it brings back a lot of memories. But that little house, 300 meters from that gate, out in the middle of the bald prairies. One night I was sleeping, and something had woken me up. And I woke up facing the wall. I was looking at the wall. I don't know what woke me up. I can still remember the wallpaper had these little brown squares, and I'm staring at those little brown squares, wide awake. And I hear something outside my bedroom door. And the first thing I thought was maybe my mother's in the kitchen. I had no reason to be scared. I'd never experienced any fear from anything or anybody. I was just a small kid. And then the latch in my door popped open, click. And the door swung open. And I was kind of frozen. I was just staring at my wall, kind of frozen. And then I heard it. It had a very, very deep, raspy breath. And it walked into my room, and it walked over to the edge of my bed. Now, I hadn't rolled over yet. I was sort of petrified. I was sort of fearful looking at the wall. And this thing was getting louder and closer. And it walked up to the edge of my bed. And then it leaned over me. And it stuck its muzzle into my neck. And I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. And I could smell its breath. I could hear it breathing in my ear from 2 inches away. And I freaked out. I sat up, I jerked up into the bed, and I threw myself into the corner, my back up against the wall, my knees around my chest, my arms around my knees. I was literally cornered. I was cornered in my own bed. And this creature, 3 feet away from me, was just rising up from where I'd just been leaning over, sniffing me. It was just rising up into its full posture. This thing was huge. My dad was a 6'2" firefighter. My dad was a big man. But this thing was on a different level. This thing was huge. It had a dog's head. I would say a German Shepherd's head. The color of its fur was that of a blue heeler dog, to be honest, that mottled gray-black sort of look. It stood there, huge. Must have been about 7 feet tall. The roof of the building, the ceiling of the building is 8 feet. Its head did not touch the ceiling, so I estimate it probably be about 7 feet tall. And it was huge. It was wide. It was broad. It was enormously huge. It rippled with muscles. The hair that come down off of its neck, like the dog's head was normal, like how you would envision any German Shepherd dog. The hair came down onto its neck, onto its shoulders, very hairy. Not shaggy, but hairy. The shoulders, the upper chest, the upper part of its body, its bicep area were all very hairy. And as it went down lower onto the body, lower onto the torso, there was less and less hair, to the point where you got to its abs, let's say, and there was very little hair. You could clearly see the skin. You could clearly see that the muscles just rippling under, well, what little fuzz and fur there was left on its skin. In its right ear, it had a blue badge about the size of a silver dollar. This is the type of blue badge that I would say, you could say, like, vote Democrat or whatever, and they have these little pins that they put on their lapels or onto their shirts. It's like one of those type of pins, and it was baby blue, and it was just stuck in its ear. The other ear was missing the tip. The tip of its ear was actually ripped off. It was jagged. It looked like an old wound. It wasn't bleeding or sore or anything. It just wasn't there. It was ripped off. So one blue pin in one ear, one ripped off tip. Its forearms were incredibly long. It had really, really long arms from its elbow down to its hands, and it had hands. It was really long, like it's disproportionately long forearm. And its hands had, and 5 fingers, had fingernails. They were really long fingernails, these black fingernails that were about 1.5 inches long, sticking out all the ends of its fingers. Really long, curved fingernails, like claws almost. This next part, it all gets pretty strange from here. From the waist down, now its waist was very narrow. It had a very narrow waist, almost disproportionately narrow to the broadness of its chest. It was wearing blue jeans, but cut off blue jeans, like shorts, like blue jean shorts, and they were cut off above the knee. There was no belt, and the jeans themselves were torn and ragged, and they were like old jeans that someone had just thrown on. But he's wearing pants, at least down to the knees. I couldn't see beyond his knees because the bed was in the way. Oh, jeez, it's really strange. I tried to scream. My mouth was agape. I was trying my best, and I couldn't get any sound out. I couldn't make any sounds. I was just petrified in fear. I was comatose with fear. It started to pace. Somehow could see that I was trying to scream. My fear, I don't know, it sent something, and it started to pace. It started to move up and down from the end of the bed to the pillow. I mean, for it was only like 1 or 2 steps. It would step down to the end of the bed. It would step back to the pillow. It would step down to the end of the bed again. Did this 3 or 4 times. All the while it was looking at me. It never turned its head. Its head was always, his eyes were locked onto me. Its eyes were black. I've heard stories about amber eyes and golden eyes. This thing had black eyes, like black pits. Anyways, it moved back and forth along the bed. Finally, I screamed. Finally, I got my scream out. It seemed like eternity. It seemed like I was sitting there for hours, but I know this is only literally a few seconds. And I finally screamed. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I screamed a primal scream. I screamed my mother, I could hear her coming down the stairs, and she's jumping 2, 3 stairs at a time, and she's running to get to me, to get to her young son. She busts through the bedroom door, and she flies in, and the wolf steps behind my mom. It literally steps behind her, back to back. It's right behind my mom. And I can't formulate words. I can't formulate thoughts. I'm pointing and I'm saying there. That's all I could say was the word there. And of course I'm pointing at my mom because it's standing behind my mom. And my mom switches to the left, and this thing moves to the left. And my mom goes to the right, and it moves to the right. And it goes back and forth. It's like a dance. It's like a dance where these moms standing back to back with this wolf who's towering over top of her. My mother takes a step towards the light switch. And she goes to flick it on. And this wolf looks at me, and it smiles. It actually smiles. I don't, it wasn't a snarl. I don't know how to explain it other than this thing just literally smiled at me, this deep, knowing, dark smile. And this is where it gets really, really, really strange. The split second before my mother flicked on that light switch, this wolf jumped to my window. It jumped at enormous speed. It was incredible speed. It just leapt towards my closed bedroom window. As it's flying towards the window, it turns into, this is crazy, it turns into a blue ball of light the size of a golf ball. This pale, shimmering blue ball of light that's moving at such a rapid speed that it actually looks like it has a tail on it. It looks like there's a tail hanging out behind this blue ball. It's moving so fast. The blue ball gets to the window, and just as it goes through the window, bing, the lights come on. And it's gone. It's gone. Now, I am an absolute nervous wreck. I'm a puddle of mess. My brain cells are banging around the inside of my skull, turning into mush. I'm almost like zombified, really. I don't recover well from this. It takes me quite a few years. But because my father was in the military and we were in Canada, we had access to medical care. So I actually had to go and see a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but a psychiatrist. And he ended up putting me on sleeping pills because sleep was out of the question for me. I spent months without sleep. I'd have that sleep disorder where you would just fall asleep at the kitchen table, or you'd just fall asleep standing up because I wasn't sleeping during the evenings. So anyways, the psychiatrist, he gives me these sleeping pills, and he also prescribes me this tea. I remember this tea. He gave me something called chamomile tea. God, that tasted like horrible, horrible juice, man. Anyways, I had to drink this chamomile tea and take a sleeping pill so that I would be able to get some sleep, at least, well, chemically induced sleep, but sleep nonetheless. And I went on for years like that, and fighting these nightmares and fighting these this fear of the unknown. Eventually, I went to university, and that's probably, when I was a young adult, and at that point I was also 6'2" and 200 pounds of muscle. And I figured the only way to get out of this fear for the last 10 years of my life was to challenge it, to ask it to come back. I don't even know if I could challenge it, but I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to come back. I wanted to see him. I wanted, fight him or challenge him, or talk to him, or I don't know what it was. I needed to get resolution on the matter, but it never came back. And I mean, that was 30 years ago when I was in university. So I decided to leave after my university years. I decided to leave Alberta. I wanted to leave all the nightmares behind and all the trauma, all of that happened that night. And I mean, it really affected me. I mean, it was primal fear. I mean, it was the monster under the bed moment, when the monster comes out to finally get you. That was the moment. And, yeah. So I left Alberta. I even left Canada, to be honest. And I ended up, migrating halfway around the world to get away from that. I'm still halfway around the world. But, yeah, so that is basically my story.
You said that you were lying in bed when that Dogman / werewolf came into your bedroom. What kind of long-lasting effects have you suffered through to present day as a result of that?
Well, when you're raised in such a safe and secure environment all your life, and monsters don't exist. I mean, there was no horror movies in my life. My mom would never let me watch things like that on television. So what come out of the woodwork that night? I mean, that was just the mind-numbing bottom of the pit, depths of hell sort of encounter, and it affected me in ways that you don't trust people. Even you can't trust people because you can't tell them what you think. You can't open up, and you sort of live with that fear that what you saw. But if you tell people what you saw, they're not going to believe you. There's absolutely no chance they're ever going to believe you. And then you're just going to be branded with some sort of weird label. And so you have to sort of hide your feelings. And as I progress through the years, as you meet, more open-minded and like-minded people, my story probably is known by 15 or 20 people out there, whether they believe me or not, but at least they have an ear to talk to, a shoulder to cry on, sort of thing. But yeah, it was long-lasting. The trauma was long-lasting for sure.
Oh, I'm sure it was, and I can understand why. At first, every indication is that what you encountered that night was a werewolf, up until the point where it transformed into that blue ball and flew towards the window. How much more difficult do you think this experience has been for you, considering all the factors around it having pants on and it transforming into that blue ball? How much more difficult do you think those factors make this experience than if you would have seemingly just had a bona fide Dogman encounter?
Well, I had never heard the term Dogman until recently, probably from your channel, to be honest. I've always considered it to be a werewolf. And I don't know where this came from, but a picture had popped up one day on one of my feeds somewhere, and it was a picture of a werewolf. And it was the picture of exactly the creature I saw. I don't know where this picture come from. I don't know if it was artificially generated or if it was someone's drawing or trail cam. I don't know what it was, but it was a picture, and it was pretty much what I saw that night. And that got my interest rekindled after all these years. And I'm staring there looking at my werewolf, and I'm like, oh, they're calling it a Dogman. And I Googled the term Dogman, and of course, your podcast popped up. And this is actually the first time I've ever heard Dogman. So I don't know what the difference would be between the two creatures. This thing was, well, it was a man with a wolf's head. Let's put it that way. A man with a dog's head. But not a man. I mean, this thing was so huge. He's so well built. I mean, I've never met a human being in my life that has a chest that size. I mean, there's no human that is physically that big. Even the dog's head was bigger than any dog I'd ever seen in my life either. So what's the difference between a Dogman and a werewolf? I really don't know.
Well, a lot of people don't know the answer to that question. The answer is Dogmen look the way they do 24/7, 365, but a werewolf has the ability to transform from a person to that of the beast that looks like a werewolf or a Dogman, basically. But considering the fact that what you saw, it transformed into that blue ball, I have no idea what that was. I'm just so sorry you had to experience that. That's horrible. I'm wondering, though, you described it as looking like a big man with a dog's head. Or a wolf's head. Does that mean that its leg structure was hominid, or did it have hocks and stifle joints instead of ankles and knee joints?
Well, I didn't see below its knees. The upper legs were obviously in a pair of jeans. I don't think it had a tail, because how would you put a tail inside a pair of blue jeans? So I don't think it had a tail. So I definitely think it's hominid from the bottom down. The upper thighs were big. I mean, proportionally as strong as what his chest would be. Like, he had big legs. But were they bent backwards? Were they hawks? No, I didn't see that. I definitely didn't see that. This was a huge man with a dog's head, and below the knees, I couldn't tell you.
Well, also, I mean, you're in such shock. You were doing good to know what your name was at the time. So the fact that you noticed the jeans and the way its thighs looked and all that, that's impressive. That's really impressive. Did your parents seem to believe you when you told them about what had happened?
My mother said she smelt something in the room. So I've talked to her, many times since, and she said when she entered the room, she said she could feel a presence. But I mean, that could have been just me with my emotional energy. She's feeling scared because I'm scared. But she confided in me that she smelled the smell of meat in the room. And that's the smell of its breath. When it leaned over me and it breathed into my face, I could smell meat. Not rotten meat, but not fresh meat either. Just, how meat smells. That's what his breath smelled like. And my mom confided in me many years later. She said, I could smell meat in that room. So...
yeah, well, they do have some strange smells. Rotting meat and sulfur sometimes, other smells as well. Urine, feces. It's really hard to know for sure what you're going to expect to smell. You said that your mother... Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to mention the blue badge in its ear. I mean, I've never heard of anybody indicating whether a dogman or werewolf has markings or carries badges on their bodies. I just don't have any idea what that could be.
Well, you're not alone in noticing that. Episode 257 had a guest come on named Roy. He talked about seeing a big black dogman that had something in its ear. He didn't know for sure what it was, but it's not just you. That's not unprecedented. You said that your mother believed you. What about your dad? What did his take seem to be on all this?
My dad actually did something pretty remarkable about a year into this, because I was fairly stressed. I couldn't sleep, had to, take those sleeping pills still. And he actually got a group of soldiers to come over to the house. And they were all heavily armed, and they had their flak jackets and their rifles. And he basically announced that they were going to cleanse the house. And he had me and my mom stand in the carport while they went into the house. Now, I'm sure they all just sat around the kitchen table and drank coffee for 20 minutes. But when they come out, the leader of that pack basically come over to me and said, we've searched this entire house. There's nothing in there. And I remember pointing out that there was a cubby in behind my dad's bed. And I said, did you find that cubby? It was like a duct cubby for ducting for the house. And he says, yeah. He says, I crawled in there on my hands and knees myself. He says, we've searched that entire house. We've been up and down everywhere. He says, whatever was here is not here anymore. And it's definitely scared to come back because it knows we're here. And if your father calls us, we'll be here in 2 minutes and we'll take care of this thing. So this was just an emotional play on a child's mind. I mean, I was a 10-year-old. I mean, it wasn't that small of a child. I was 10 years old. But this was a show of force. And this is how my dad could deal with it, because he was a soldier. So this show of force to show his son that he's the boss. This is his house. Nothing's getting into his house. These are his soldiers, or his friends anyways. And I think that actually helped me. I think that showed me that people were on my side, that people believed in me, that nobody was laughing at me. And the guys with the guns were just literally around the corner, and they were there to help me if I needed it. So, yeah, that was a game changer, I'd say.
Wow, what a great dad. I'm so glad he did that. What a good man. You didn't know what to expect when your parents sent you to see that psychiatrist. That's a given. You're just 10 years old. But looking back on how they treated you, what they decided to do, are you happy with how they handled the situation, or do you think it was just a waste of time?
Well, I think they were pretty much out of their element. They didn't know how to deal with a kid who saw the boogeyman. They just didn't really know how to deal with the situation. So they did the best they could. And then they realized I wasn't sleeping. And I think it's called narcolepsy, when you just fall asleep randomly because of, lack of sleep, and the stress levels are so high. And, they didn't know what to do. So they sought medical help. And, I'm not so sure that it really helped. Probably the soldiers in the house with their guns was probably a bigger help, mentally, psychologically, for a child. But I remember the psychiatrist himself. I definitely remember he did not believe me. He absolutely did not believe me. And so it doesn't really help when you're trying to tell your story to somebody who basically just, doesn't believe, just basically thinks you're just having nightmares, even you've dreamt it all. I mean, you can dream some pretty wild dreams, and you can have some pretty vivid dreams, but you're not standing there screaming, smelling, feeling, touching, wide awake. That ain't no dream. This is the real world. And when the psychologist himself doesn't believe it, you tend to lose faith. You lose faith in that, in that sort of help.
Oh, of course you do. Yeah, there are people out there who are naive enough to believe, well, if you have a dogman encounter, just go seek professional help. Problem solved. But in a lot of cases, that's just going to make the matter worse. So I definitely don't recommend doing that, but let me qualify that. Yes, there are psychologists out there. There are psychiatrists out there who will believe you and who will listen to you. But the odds of actually finding one who will are like hitting the lottery. So yeah, your odds of actually having a situation turn out for the better by seeking professional help are nigh impossible. They really are.
Yeah, I think the best thing that I did was when I was a young adult in university, when I actually decided I would try to challenge this thing, and I used to go for walks in the park at night, and I used to yell out there and say, come back, just get back here. I want to see you again. Let's resolve this. And I really thought that if I could get him to come back, I would be able to close the issue. And of course, he never did come back, but that just alone, me willing to challenge it, me willing to say, I'm not afraid anymore. This boy's not afraid. This is not a little child anymore. This is a big man, and I'm going to deal with the problem when the problem gets to me. And just the fact that I tried to do that actually changed the picture completely. It set me free. So I sleep well at night now, and I don't have any issues with it now. I mean, I'm going to probably double lock the doors tonight and get out my Rungu and put it next to my bed maybe. But it's far behind me now.
Well, that's great. I'm so glad it is. And you know how it is when you're that age, you're strong and you're still young and everything. You're bulletproof, at least in your mind you are. So I can understand why you did that. But looking back with your wisdom, with your knowledge now, do you wish you wouldn't have done that? Because if you shake enough trees, a leopard just might fall out.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have actually have done if it had ever come back. I like to think in my head I would have challenged it. I would have pulled out my pistol or got my knife out, or I would have, I would have physically challenged this creature. But the thing was so huge, I wouldn't have stood a chance anyways, even with the pistol. The thing was monstrous. But it was just closure. It was just mental closure. At least I challenged it in my mind, even if I didn't ever see it or ever have a chance to physically do anything with it a second time. At least in my own mind, I was ready for the fight. And that gave me closure, yeah. So I ended up leaving Canada and moving halfway around the world, and left all that behind. I think I've been back to Canada 3 or 4 times in the last 25 years. And I've settled a new life. And I think the demons and the evils of whatever's out there on the prairies is true and far behind me now.
Well, hopefully so. I'm kind of conflicted on whether to let you know about this or not, but dogmen are in Africa. I don't know about werewolves, if they actually do exist, which, listening to you talk about your experience, if that wasn't a werewolf, I don't know what it was. But yeah, I mean, the odds, even if you were stateside or in Canada, the odds of you having another encounter are very, very remote, for whatever that helps. But moving on there, down the road, if you were to have another experience, do you think that's a good thing now or a bad thing? Because if you did have another experience, I guess there's that remote possibility that would allow you to bring closure to all this. I don't know you, so I'm not sure how your thinking works. So that's why I was asking you about that.
Well, I think if I saw another one, I don't think I would be frightened, because I had so much fear and trauma for all those years that I've run out of fear. It's gone. I truly think that if I bumped into one tonight on the street, I would ponder it. I would probably try to talk to it. I would probably try to engage with it. My younger me, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, probably would have tried to fight it or kill it. But I don't think it would affect me anywhere near as strongly, irrationally, as poorly as it did all those years back. If I've never heard of Dogman being here in Kenya where I stay. I've never heard the locals talk about them. They talk about things like the night runners, and these creatures that run around at night banging on the roofs and banging on their doors. But as far as those night runners go, I don't think there's any physical description of them. It's more like just, bumps in the night. So I've never actually heard of Dogmen being around at least in my area of Kenya.
Night runners? What are they supposed to look like?
Well, they're supposed to be ethereal, I guess. They're sort of smoke and mirrors, and they throw stones at your house and knock on your door in the middle of the night and wake you up. And they're the banshee, the sort of banshee sounds, the yelling and screaming at night. And there's also people that mimic the night runners. So people will go out and they will have big bonfires, and then they'll run around the villages in the tribal parts of Kenya, and they'll also mimic the antics of a night runner. And they call themselves night runners as well. So yeah, it's sort of more of a superstition or a lore or things that go bump in the night. Yeah.
Wow, Jay running around in the middle of the night, pretending to be a night runner in Kenya? That doesn't sound like a very wise move. That's a good way to get the wind let out of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Especially out here in rural Africa, man, you're going to get a machete attack on you. So yeah, not a very safe sport. That's for sure.
No, it's not. I could think of places where it'd be a lot safer to do something like that, but definitely not a good idea at all.
There's also a place here called Nandi, which is pretty close to where I live. And apparently there's a thing called the Nandi bear. And it goes back to the colonial days. It hasn't been seen in a long time, but this Nandi bear is supposedly, a Bigfoot. And it's up in the Nandi Hills by a town called Eldoret, which is about 300 kilometers from where I live. And the Nandi bear was a thing in the colonial times, but I'm like a Bigfoot.
I thought I had heard about Sasquatch being in Africa, but never really did hear all that much about that. So that's interesting. I don't need to ask you if you think this thing was intelligent, because it's clear you definitely do believe it was intelligent because of the way it acted and conducted itself. But when we look at the big picture here you were this little kid in bed, cornered by this thing. If we don't lose sight of the fact that it had intelligence, why do you think it went through all the trouble to come into your bedroom and not hurt you when it had every opportunity to do so?
I think that it walked in the front door of the house because we didn't lock our doors. We lived on a military base in what I call a gated community, right? Nobody locked their doors. This is in the 80s in a very secure area of the world. Nobody locked their doors. I think this thing just literally walked in the front door, walked up to the first door on the right and opened the door and walked in. There I was. I think that's all that happened. This thing did not try to grab me. It didn't try to accost me. It didn't do anything to me except just stare at me. It literally, almost like it just walked in off the street and it was as stunned by seeing me as I was stunned by seeing it. And it just literally stood there and breathed this raspy, stinking breath at me and just looked at me. And then gave me that final smile and jumped out my window. For all the fear and as scared as I was, this thing never actually attempted to do anything to me. It didn't even have a threatening mannerism at all. It just literally, it didn't snarl at me. It didn't bark at me. It didn't howl. It just literally paced up and down the end of my bed and jumped out my window.
Well, thank goodness it left. Eventually, watching it do that hiding thing behind your mom's back, that had to be almost as traumatizing as being cornered by this thing as it's looming over you. That's horrible.
This thing was smart. It knew my mom was coming. It prepared for her to come through the door. It heard her coming, prepared for her. It jumped behind her. It was extremely quick, like lightning fast. And, very intelligent. But the way that it looked at me in the bed, I would almost say it was curious. I would always say there was curiosity. It was almost like, what is this thing? Or, I don't know. Obviously it must know what I am, but looking at me and the way I'm sleeping or my size or my I don't know. It was curious. And the way it smiled at me before it jumped was an intelligent smile. It was communicating something. It was communicating a goodbye, maybe a goodbye smile or, nice knowing you smile. And then it left. It was definitely intelligent, absolutely intelligent.
Oh, it sure sounds like it. I'm not really sure the best way to ask this next question. Considering how big it was, but also at the same time, the fact that you said it was lightning fast, being able to move, stay behind your mother. She would look this way, it would move the other way behind her, and vice versa. Did it look like it had weight, or did it seem to be weightless, and that's how it was able to be so quick?
I would put it, I'd probably say weightless. This thing was shifting from to the left to the right. I mean, my mother was doing it, and this thing was matching it at the same speed. But it had to know my mother was doing it. It has to be half a second ahead of my mother to be able to keep out of her vision, right? And it's always keeping out of her vision. So it's moving almost ethereally. It's almost moving like it's like when it turned into the blue light. It's almost not human. It's almost like it's not part of the physical world. It's I don't even know the words for it. I don't have the words for it. It's ethereal. It's not real. It's like, I don't know. I don't know the words for it. I don't possess the words for that type of motion, that type of creature. It's almost like spotty. When you watch it move from the left to the right, it's almost like it's twitching. It's like it's twitching fast. It's not like a smooth movement. It's twitching through its movements. It's it's almost like it's there 1 minute and one second and not there the next second. So is it weightless? I don't know. It's almost like it's not real. It's almost like you're looking at a reflection or something. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And it's funny talking about things that aren't unprecedented. I've spoken with other eyewitnesses, Dogman eyewitnesses, that is, who talked about noticing twitchy movements from the Dogman that they saw. Now, again, we don't know what this thing was. Doesn't seem to be a Dogman doing the things that this thing did, but people have told me about noticing a twitchy, hard to describe the movements, but a jerky kind of a twitchy movement to the Dogman that they saw. So it's not just you.
That's interesting because I've not heard that from any. Well, I haven't watched a lot of your podcast, to be honest, or listened to a lot of your podcasts, but I'm going to have to start listening now because that twitchy movement that I described, that you've just described, that's exactly what it is. It's almost like twitching in and out of reality like 1,000 times a second. And it's there, but it's not quite there. And it's moving so fast. And like when it leapt towards the window, it's like it disappeared. It was so fast. I mean, it covered that 10, 12 feet in just a nanosecond. And the ball of light appeared about halfway through its journey from the edge of the bed to the window. About halfway, it just down into a little blue ball the size of a golf ball and zoom, straight out the window. Crazy. Super speed, super speed.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around all these things they can do. They just seem to be impossible. And you talking about how quick and how fast that thing was. It brings to mind an experience that an eyewitness shared with me years ago. This was probably 5-6 years ago. This guy had some credentials. He had a lot of experience in the military, I think even special forces. Well, one night he lives way out, I think in the mountains. Well, one night he heard some noise out at his dog kennel. And at first I think he brushed it off, but then he got the impression there might be something going on out there. So he put his shorts on, I guess, and his shoes, and he grabbed a gun and a flashlight and headed out there behind his house. And without turning on his flashlight, there was enough moonlight out, I think he said, where he was able to look over towards the kennels, and he noticed a huge black figure standing on his side of the kennels, staring at the dogs in the kennels. The dogs were going crazy, running back and forth and everything. And this thing was tall enough where it was, I guess, towering over the kennels. I can't remember how tall he said this thing was. I think probably about 8 feet-ish or so. Maybe taller, maybe a little shorter. But anyway, he couldn't tell what it was, understandably so. He was just seeing like a silhouette. So he decided to try and creep up on it. So using all the skills that he had amassed over the years, he started working his way towards it and still had its back towards him. Well, once he got within a certain range, I think pretty close, I think he was probably maybe 7-8 feet from it, directly behind it, all of a sudden, without him making any noise, he said he was dead silent. All of a sudden, without any indications, this thing pivoted. It's not the right word. It spun around in place so fast that he couldn't even see it turn. He said that at that range, I think you could see the pointed ears on top of its head, kind of angled down because it was looking down at the kennels. And the next thing you knew, it spun around so quick that its back became its front became its back. It's facing him. It's just right there, staring him down. When they do things like that, it sure does make you wonder how in the world something so big can move that fast, can be so agile. It's just really hard to wrap your head around.
Well, this is just like when it jumped behind my mom. I mean, it was just standing at the edge of the bed in 1 second, and then instantly it's behind my mother, back to back. That movement, it's not visible. I don't remember seeing it actually jump behind my mom. It just was suddenly just behind my mom. But another thing that's interesting, you said that creature was standing there watching the dogs, just observing them, just staring at them. Well, that's exactly what this thing was doing to me. It was just standing there observing me. Yeah, it's the same sort of situation where it's just observing. It doesn't seem to be threatening, and just watching the barking dogs or just watching the kid sleep in his bed. It's just observing peacefully. And then when somebody's intruding into its space, it just does these weird, quick, jerky movements and, well, just jumps away, just gets away.
Yeah, there had to be a reason why it did what it did that night to you. Their thoughts are their own. You just can't think for them. So only they know why they do the things they do. You said that it smiled at you. With that in mind, how would you describe its teeth?
I don't think that they were much different than a normal dog's teeth, to be honest. The incisors, the canine incisors that come down were very long. I mean, this was a big head, and these were big teeth, and they protruded out of the mouth. Even when the mouth was shut, the fangs were still sticking out. So the fangs were there, so they're very large. But as far as one report that I heard said that they were really pointy teeth, really sharp pointed teeth. The only really evident teeth that were evident that I could see was these two big canines sticking out the front. The rest just looked like normal dog's teeth. I didn't see anything particularly strange about them.
Huh, well, that's interesting. Did you ever see it drool?
No, it did not drool. And it didn't close its mouth the entire time. Its mouth was always open. It was a mouth breather. It was breathing through its mouth. That's where the raspy sound was coming from. So this was a mouth breather with its mouth partially open. And it never opened its mouth further than that, and it never closed its mouth through the whole time that it was there. It just had its mouth partially open, maybe like 1 inch open, breathing through its mouth.
A lot of Dogman eyewitnesses report that the teeth in the Dogman's mouth that they saw seemed to be too big to allow it to close its mouth. Do you think that might be why this one that you saw, whatever it was, didn't close its mouth?
It could be. It could be because it didn't close its mouth. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? I mean, I wasn't really staring at its teeth, but I was, eye contact was a big thing, trying to keep eye contact with this thing. And looking at that ear with a badge in it, I kept looking at that ear, and then I kept looking at its torso because it was just rippling with muscles. And so my focus was eyes and ears and torso. That's where my attention was drawn to. I wasn't really looking at its mouth so much, but it definitely had not gaping, just an open mouth, maybe 1 inch open, and it never stuck its tongue out, and it never panted. There was no panting like a dog would pant. It was just raspy. This type of breathing. Really strange.
Wow, if that isn't creepy. If it had its mouth open the whole time, did you notice anything unusual about its tongue?
I didn't see its tongue. I never saw its tongue. I was looking up, and I don't remember seeing its tongue at all. Not at all.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, like I said, you had so much going through your head that you were doing good to know what year it was. So that's totally understandable. How would you describe the lighting conditions in the room?
Bright. So the window that it exited through was quite a large window at the end of my bed. And it didn't have blinds or curtains on it. It was just like a big open window. And the backyard was illuminated. The whole back area behind these houses was like a big military compound, and it was all illuminated. So the lights would just come straight in through to the window. So the ambient light was good enough that I could see color, because I could tell the color of the badge in its ear, the blue badge. So if most people see in grayscale in the dark, and if you can see any sort of color, then your ambient light must be high enough for your optics to pick up the color there with the rods and the cones in your eyes. So if you're seeing color, there's enough light. And I could definitely see the brown on my wall, and I could see the blue in its ear. And so the lighting was very good, actually.
Sure does make you wonder. On one hand, if the room would have been dark, you wouldn't have gotten as good of a look. Sometimes not being able to see something like that very well makes it that much more intense, that much more frightening. But what's your take on that? Do you think it was definitely a good thing to see this thing so well?
Yeah, I guess it's probably better to know what you're dealing with rather than some shadow, some spook in the closet. This thing, another thing about the color was the color of its fur was quite interesting. Is that grayish blue color that you get on a blue heeler dog, an Australian cattle dog. It was that color. Sort of like, almost give me the impression that it's an old man, like an old, like blue hair with black streaks in it. Almost elderly colored hair, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Might have had some age to it. You never know.
It wasn't shaggy hair either. It wasn't unkempt. I would almost say groomed. I would almost say that the fur was groomed. It wasn't shaggy. It wasn't ruffled up. I mean, maybe groomed is not the right term either, but it definitely wasn't shaggy. I would almost say this is a groomed old man. I would say this is a groomed, or just by the color of his hair, it seemed muscular like a young man, but the color of an old man, and groomed like an older man would take care of himself. I don't know. This is kind of the impressions that I have thinking back to what I saw that night.
Well, I still think you should be commended for all the details you noticed. Most people would have noticed half as many things as you did, so that's impressive. You said that it didn't have glowing amber eyes or red eyes. You said its eyes were coal black. Did its pupils fill its whole eye socket, or could you see a little bit of white on either side?
There was absolutely no white in his eyes. His eyes were black pits. They were just completely solid black. There was no pupil. There was no white. They were just black pits.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty intimidating. There are elements to that thing that you saw, Jay, that tell me that it just might have been a Dogman. There are elements that make me think it must have been something else, i.e. a werewolf. A lot of Dogman eyewitnesses, when you look at the big picture, not many eyewitnesses report seeing this, but I've spoken with thousands upon thousands of Dogman eyewitnesses over the years. So as a result, I have talked to my fair share of eyewitnesses who have witnessed seeing orbs, either before the Dogman showed up or after the Dogman showed up. But never have they reported to me seeing a Dogman turn into an orb or transform from an orb into the form of a Dogman. But there definitely does seem to be a connection there, so maybe what you saw actually was a Dogman. I don't know. But the pants, the fact this thing had pants on, that makes me think it must have been something other than a Dogman. Possibly, if werewolves do exist, possibly a werewolf. And then also on top of that, to further muddy the waters, what about that badge in its ear? So there are elements to this whole thing that I'm not really sure what to think about it.
Have you ever heard of a report where a werewolf or a Dogman is wearing clothing? Have you ever heard of any report like that?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard about people seeing things that are that shape, that have pants on or shorts on, but I don't know if that means it was a werewolf, not a Dogman. I don't know what to think of that, because Dogmen look the way they do 24/7, 365. But that's not to say there aren't other things out there that do have the ability to transform somehow from the form of a human to that of a werewolf. So I don't know. I really don't know what to think about that.
Well, when I tell this story to the few people I have told it to, most people are willing to accept the orb part of it, but they are absolutely incredulous at the fact that this thing was wearing pants. That's the thing that really, like, people say, that's nonsense. He's wearing pants. But they can easily accept this thing turning into a blue orb and bouncing out my window. I mean, I don't understand.
Well, that makes two of us. There's so many things when it comes to Dogman encounters, and encounters like yours, it might be something other than a Dogman. We don't know what it was, but yeah, there's so many things that we just don't know about all these things that it just adds to the mystery. It really does. It seems like you're okay now, present day, but does that mean that you can head into the jungle there in Kenya, if you have any jungle around near where you're at right now, without any issues? Or do you still have trouble going out at night? Do you still look over your shoulder, in other words?
No, I'm pretty confident these days. I don't have any issues. I do live next to a tropical rainforest, and I hike up in there pretty regularly, actually. And it's called the Kakamega Rainforest. So I hike up in there, and I travel all around East Africa. I was in Rwanda a bit ago, and spent a lot of time in Uganda. And I get out into some pretty remote places, and I don't have any fear. The only thing here that really is dangerous is the known wildlife, hippos, crocodiles. They're the real fear here. But as far as anything supernatural, like a Dogman or a werewolf or a Nandi bear, I don't have any fear. No, nothing like that in Kenya.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, as long as you can say that, that's a great thing. Now that you're as old and wise as you are, I know there are kids listening to the show tonight who've had their own encounters with dogmen coming into their bedrooms. What kind of advice would you give those kids, keeping in mind that some of those kids haven't told their parents about their experiences with dogmen, have kept the experiences to themselves for obvious reasons? Given all of your wisdom, what would you say to a kid like that who's listening to tonight's show in the way of advice?
I think I would try to engage it rather than do what I did, which was just basically wet my pants and hide in the corner and cower like a little scaredy cat. I think I would try to engage, because you have nothing to lose by talking to it or trying to speak to it or see if there's any way to engage with it. I wouldn't be scared, because there's no point. You're going to waste years of your life being scared of the dark when, if you have seen a dog man and it hasn't attacked you, it hasn't hurt you, it hasn't shown any aggression towards you, why do you think it's going to do it if you try to engage it? If you say, hey, what are you doing over there? And try to engage this creature. If it hasn't hurt you already, why do you think it's going to hurt you in the future? And why should you be scared and spend future years of your life in eternal fear, basically? So no, my advice is engage, try to talk to it, try to see what it's up to. And of course, if it is dangerous, if it does do something dangerous, well, that's a different story. But very few encounters that I've seen so far on your podcasts are actually dangerous encounters. Most of them are just visuals.
You're right. That's how it normally goes. After speaking with thousands upon thousands of dogman eyewitnesses, a grand total of credible eyewitnesses I've ever spoken with who were ever intentionally harmed by a dogman they encountered, 7, 8, maybe 9. So that says everything right there. It really does. You're going to be surprised to hear this, but yeah, there have been a number of people who have contacted me recently to let me know about an experience they had with a dogman coming into their bedroom. Not looking out the bedroom window and seeing it out there, but actually contacting me to tell me about an encounter they had inside their bedrooms. So yeah, it's far from being a case of just you having to deal with the trauma of that over the years. It's not just you by a long shot. But having said that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share before we get out of here?
No, I'm glad I got that off my chest, and I guess telling the world now. There's probably only about 20, 25 people on the entire planet that even know that had this encounter. So yeah, it's interesting. I would keep an open mind, keep looking in the shadows, see what you can see out there. And I wouldn't be scared of things that go bump in the night. I think try to embrace it and don't bring the fear inside. I think that's my advice.
Well, that's really good advice. It really is. Jay, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of this experience with us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Vic.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to give you a platform. Thanks again so much for your time, and have a great night.